Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to another comic book day. This is a comic book video for those of you who might be interested in such things, and we are talking about old back issues of comics. I'm going through my cardboard long boxes of back issues. We're not talking about new issues yet, because despite some charitable mail from Vermont, I have not yet resumed the habit of going to my new comic shop on Wednesdays or Tuesdays or whenever they get their new releases. When I do, these will leaven out, and we won't be spending quite so much time with old issues unless you want to. Maybe an old issue on Friday and new issues on Wednesday. But in the meantime, we're going through my long boxes. I'm just grabbing a handful at a time of older issues that span 50 years, so you never know what you're going to find here. Okay, this first one is Marvel Comics. This is from the 1980s, 1983. This is Kull the Conqueror, #1. With a wraparound cover by Jusko? Yes? Not a very good cover, but a wraparound cover and just the same. But boy, oh boy, the inside is fantastic. This is a rare Robert E. Howard production. Kull the Conqueror was a creation of the creator of Conan the Barbarian. This is a rare such Marvel production that it has no touch of Roy Thomas, the writer, at all. This is written by Bruce Jones and April Campbell. But more importantly, it's drawn by John Buscema, who is a great Conan artist and a great Thor artist, just a great artist in general. He also did a fantastic run on the Silver Surfer a long, long time ago. And this is an extra long story about this woman, Irena, who comes to Kull's court as a consort of a warlord, and then in the course of a carousing evening, she expresses her displeasure with the warlord she came with. Look at that panel. Look at that. That is amazing. Doesn't need any words at all. You don't need a writer for a panel like that. And you don't need a writer for a lot of what Buscema does. When his artwork is really, really good, you don't need. This tells a backstory of Kull and his origin as a boy. It tells the story of Irena and her female warriors who transform into tigers. Look at that. Incredible. This is just a fantastic issue. And I kept it not only because I really, really like Kull. As far as Robert E. Howard creations go, I really like Kull. For one of the reasons that you don't get in the Conan stories, which is that Kull has a supporting cast. A regular supporting cast, and they're full of variety, and you don't get that in Conan. So that's one of the reasons that I like it. I also like the fact that Kull is a little bit further from his own stripling barbarian youth than we usually see Conan. Kull is almost always, when he is in a comic book, portrayed as king. But one way or another, I kept this issue for not only because I love Kull, but because I have no idea where I'd ever find it reprinted. No idea. Has Marvel's run of Kull the Conqueror ever been reprinted in one volume? And even if it has, how much of that volume would I even want? I want the first issue. I don't know how many of the other issues I would want. John Buscema also did Kull in an issue of Conan the Barbarian for Marvel in the 70s, where it was an amazing issue. It still pleases me, where Conan, Red Sonja, and Beylit, the Queen of the Black Coast, they all go into a weird temple and travel in time without knowing it and encounter King Kull. And the issue has a Gil Kane cover, has John Buscema artwork, and one of the features of that internal artwork is Conan and Kull fighting each other, even though they live thousands of years apart in Robert E. Howard's mythology. That was a sublime issue, absolutely sublime. But anyway, then we move ahead to the Legion of Superheroes. This is a super team of teenagers set 1,000 years in the future, and this is from the 1990s, I believe. This particular issue, 1996. This is drawn by Lee Moder. Yes, Lee Moder, who's fantastic. I don't know that Lee Moder does any more work for comic books, but this storyline takes a core group of Legionnaires, of Legion of Superhero members, back in time to the 21st or 20th century, to Metropolis, where they meet you-know-who. And I was following the Legion at the time, so I have this issue. I probably have a lot of others. They just aren't together. They should be. This was, for those of you Superman Archive fans, this was the lamentable period when Superman had that hair. try not to think about it. he had long hair in the back. Oh my. Okay. Oh goodness gracious. Okay. Great. All right. This is the team up of the writer Kurt Busiek and the artist George Perez. And this is something that was long in the making, long promised to fans, which was a team up between DC's premier superhero team, the Justice League, and Marvel's premier superhero team, the Avengers. And it was proposed, a team up between the two teams was proposed probably 30 years before this. There was a miniseries that Marvel did in the early 2000s, I believe. I don't know that I'm going to be able to find that in a book like this. 2003, yes. In 2003, Marvel finally did that. They had the Avengers and the Justice League fight and then team up in an epic 4-issue miniseries that's just incredible. And one of the greatest things George Perez ever drew. And that's saying something, because he never drew anything bad. But 30 years before this came out, the companies did start to work on a team-up between the two teams. That was, as a testament to George Perez's longevity in the industry, still going to be drawn by George Perez, even 30 years before. And that... Every magazine, every industry magazine like Amazing Heroes was full of reports and updates on that team up. Fans were wild about it, and it never happened. Other cross-company team-ups did happen. The great team-up drawn by Ross Andru, where Spider-Man meets Superman, and all of the follow-ups to that, the Teen Titans meet the X-Men, the two great superhero revival teams of the 80s. Superman and Spider-Man team up again, Batman and the Hulk and whatnot. But despite the fact that those things did well, the Justice League Avengers team up never really happened. And finally, the kinks got worked out for a JLA Avengers team up that is epic, just incredible. The first issue and a half, is the teams fighting each other. Core groups of the teams fighting each other, which puts on Kurt Busiek's shoulders the task of how to pick a core team. Now, for the Justice League, that's easy, fairly easy to do. The Magnificent Seven. You have the Martian Manhunter, who's a character who never really caught on in the popular imagination, but then you have absolute industry standards: Wonder Woman, Batman, The Flash, Green Lantern, Superman, Batman. For the Avengers, it's a little harder to do. The Avengers does have a sort of core trinity: Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor. But then who else do you have? You probably want the Vision and the Scarlet Witch. You probably want Hawkeye. You probably want the Pyms, Janet Pym and Hank Pym, Ant-Man and the Wasp. And then you might want to add somebody else or something like that. You'll notice right away, for instance, in Busiek adds Quicksilver, because old-times Avengers fans love the huge rotating roster, but they also love the time that we've talked about on this channel where the Avengers was Captain America, the Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, and Hawkeye. Just 4 of them. And no one overwhelmingly powerful. Longtime Avengers fans like Kurt Busiek love that era. So what he did for his core Avengers team was that core foursome plus the big 3 and the Pyms. And you can tell right away when you look at that lineup that if the teams are going to fight each other, for the Justice League, I forgot to mention Aquaman. You can't do that when he's $1 billion baby in the box office now. But the thing you notice right away when you look at that is that per member, the Justice League is much more powerful than the Avengers, even in that incarnation, which would make it a little bit lopsided to have them fight. There's no automatically necessary opposing number for Iron Man, for instance, to fight. It's obvious that if you have the two teams fight, Batman and Captain America are going to square off. And they do. They do. And they have unarmed combat for a few panels. And then Batman says to Captain America, well, I've analyzed you, and I think it's likely that after a prolonged bout of unarmed combat, you would win. But really, we shouldn't be doing that because we're on the same side, and reason triumphs because Batman has that moment. But it's a fascinating admission on the part of a writer. It's a fascinating admission that the DC character would lose. It makes sense. Batman is a rigorously trained athlete who's adept at unarmed combat, but Captain America is a little more than that, right? He has the super soldier formula that makes him a little bit more than human, and he doesn't get tired, and Batman does. So That's was fascinating right there. But then you had the big moment, because of course the fight of all fights is going to be Thor versus Superman, the two strongest characters in each company fighting off against each other, and famously, Superman wins. He knocks Thor unconscious after a prolonged battle, but he knocks him unconscious. And comic book fans had an issue with that. This particular comic book fan had an issue with that. Thor is as strong as Hercules, or as strong as Superman, and he's a mystical being. And Superman is particularly vulnerable to magic. Thor should not have lost, in other words. But this issue right here, I have the graphic novel that was put together of all of these. It's sumptuous to reread, just sumptuous. But this is issue number, I want to say 3. Yes, this is number 3 of 4 that came. I have the individual issues as well. And this cover ought to get George Perez a medal just on its own, because this cover is every single Marvel and DC character who have ever been members of the Justice League or the Avengers. Every single one of them. Just look at the detail there. You have all the marquee characters right in front there, but you also have everybody else. Every single character who has ever been, even briefly, an Avenger or a member of the JLA. Every single one of them. Incredible. You can see the characters are running towards you on a bed of sand, and you see a face, because the Sandman, the old Spider-Man villain, was briefly a member of the Avengers. That's just incredible. That's just an amazing feat right there. I would have paid for this issue even just for that. But the issue was wonderful too, because this issue takes place when the two realities that the teams live in, they obviously don't occupy the same Earth. They occupy different realities. And in the cosmic MacGuffin that is the storyline here, those realities merge. Right at the beginning of issue number 3, those realities are merged. The Avengers and the JLA have always been teammates on the same world, and they don't remember anything else at the beginning of this issue. But eventually, cracks start to open up, and they start to realize that this is not the way reality should be. They are helped in this, of course, by the Phantom Stranger, one of the least explained DC heroes. And they go into an alternate realm, an extra-dimensional realm, where they are able to see glimpses of the real realities. They're two separate real realities. And a lot of those glimpses are bad. A lot of them are bad. The Justice League headquarters blows up, their satellite. And the Avengers headquarters sinks into the bay. For one thing, Captain America wears armor because his super soldier formula stops working. Let's see here. Oh, yes. Very touching moment. Hank Pym, in a moment of psychological distress, slaps Janet Van Dyne. This Hank Pym and Janet Van Dyne in this merged reality can't imagine that such a thing would happen. But in comic books, in Marvel Comics, it did. Aquaman remembers losing his hand, having his hand bitten off. The Scarlet Witch remembers the time when her husband, the Vision, was kidnapped and disassembled. And also remembers that her 2 children were figments of her imagination. The Flash remembers dying. Wonder Woman remembers the death of her mother. Thor remembers Ragnarok and the death of his people. Batman remembers having his back broken by Bane. He remembers the death of Robin. And, of course, there are the big ones that are saved for the final page. Superman sees that he died. Iron Man sees that he was a hopeless alcoholic. And Green Lantern sees that he became a nearly omnipotent supervillain who killed a whole city. And it's a great moment. Busiek understands these characters really well. I might not always agree with his details, but he understands these characters really well. And the characters are faced with a horrible decision there in this extra-dimensional realm. Do they go back to their merged reality, knowing what they know, knowing how many people aren't alive because those realities merged, how much is different that shouldn't be? Or do they go back and fight to separate their realities, knowing what they will be incurring, knowing the tragedies they'll be inviting on themselves? Green Lantern says that there isn't another way, and we all know it. There are millions, maybe billions, dead or dying in the worlds as they are. Can we choose their deaths because they're easier to bear? The reality we saw, it's truth. Good, bad, love, pain, it's real. It's the one we're pledged to protect, not to play God with. And they agree. the de facto leaders here for the two teams are Captain America and Superman. And they agree that despite anything, they will go back. They will fight to separate those realities because that's what heroes do. Amazing. Probably my favorite moment in this whole miniseries. So I have this issue, and I don't know if you can make it out. You probably can't make it out. There's a hole. That is a basset hound tooth that made that hole. I don't know if you could see that very clearly. My baby, my little hippo used to pick things up and walk around with them until she got tired and fell asleep. Every once in a while, one of her teeth would go through something. All right. Okay, great. This is a landmark thing. I think we saw this on this channel. This is Action Comics number 1000. Square-bound celebration of the 1000th issue of Action Comics. Full of pin-ups, full of teaser stories and little story events. Okay. All right, this is Salvador Larroca, he's the artist, and Chris Claremont is the writer. And this is a run on the Fantastic Four that they did. I really like it. It's hideously overwritten in the way of Chris Claremont, but still really, really good, really enjoyable stuff. And it goes on. There's Valeria Von Doom. She's introduced here into the continuity to stay. And there's Annihilus from the Negative Zone. There's the Thing fighting cartoon characters. There's the Gray Gargoyle fighting the Fantastic Four, and here's the Fantastic Four sending Franklin Richards away, and this issue, I don't know if you noticed, it takes place at a Comic-Con, chaos at the Comic-Con, and these are really good. They're really enjoyable. The only reason that I look askance at these individual issues is because I don't need them anymore. I have Marvel has finally did a paperback collection of this run, and there's going to be another paperback collection to cover the rest of it. And I'd much rather have a book that I can pull off a shelf and revisit when I want to than to have to go and dig out individual issues. So I'm glad of that. Okay, well, we're going to finish out this particular comic book video with the Holy Grail. Much as I love that Avengers and JLA team up, I was not happy with the end result of Thor versus Superman. And also continuity has changed. Characters have changed. Like, for instance, in that 4-issue miniseries, at one point, She-Hulk fights Aquaman. And she comments, you're mighty tough, you're mighty durable, and you sure are easy on the eyes. But come on, we both know I'm a lot stronger than you are. And I don't think that would be true. In current comics, Aquaman has slowly but steadily been given a power upgrade that he has long since deserved. He has long since warranted such a thing. So it could be that he would duke it out with She-Hulk in a new version of this. But one way or another, much as I love that miniseries, nothing replaces this love, this particular love. Now, these are not the original. These are from the 1960s, when I was not a stripling. And this is Superboy. This is not a clone of Superman. This is not a son of Superman. This is Superboy, the adventures of Superman when he was a boy. Clark Kent, as a teenager in Smallville. And this is a run that a lot of these, this is number 152, a lot of these in here have Neil Adams covers. That is a great Neil Adams cover. This is a Kurt Swan cover, the famous Superman artist, who often could do Superboy covers, and sometimes interior artwork. Oh no, we're interspersed here. Here's the modern day adventure comics with Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. Only, as you can tell, we draw things a little differently in the 2000s than we did back in the 1960s. That 9-pack belongs to young Superboy. And this is and here's even earlier. This is from the 1970s, I think. 1975. This is Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes. Because that often happened. Every time the Legion of Superheroes, who started out as just a guest starring bit on Superboy in Adventure Comics, every time they were given any kind of regular appearance, fans voted them to the front spot and they elbowed out Superboy. So the Legion doesn't often appear in these other Superboy comics. But this is, look at that. This is number 159, another great Neil Adams cover. Here's, oh boy, I have read these things to death, just to death. And this one shows. This is number 160. This is a great Neil Adams cover. Superboy is on the moon. He's exiled from Earth. I really wish that these things were reprinted in a big omnibus. I really do. Or at the very least, a book of Neil Adams' covers would be great. This is number 153. Look at that. The Kents are in trouble. Here's a classic one. This is 151. I killed Lana Lang. Look at that. That's just awesome. Here's Nobody Can Stop Mr. Cypher, even Superboy. He's crushing a gun in his hand. Or a telephone. Here's Superboy. Blind. These Neil Adams covers are amazing. Here's another Kurt Swan cover. The Boy Who Was Braver Than Superboy. That was a familiar motif in these Superboy comics, was bring on a character who has the powers of Superboy just for an issue and then get rid of them. Here's another Kurt Swan cover, clobbered by the fists of steel. Here's Superboy number 126. This one, on its cover, it boasts the origin of Crypto the Superdog. And here is a Kurt Swan cover where he is he's lifting up a car, and you can see some of early 1960s graffiti. And one of them is, this car sold for $100,000. Never crossed anybody's mind in 1960 that a car would ever actually cost $100,000. That's why it's meant to be funny. But these issues, oh my! All right, and the last one, this one is Super Baby. Often we would get in these issues, in addition to a Superboy adventure. There's always a Superboy adventure in every issue, but sometimes you would get Super Dog adventures or Super Baby adventures, and then the Scoundrel of Steel, where he's disrupting the classroom. This is Superboy number 134, and it reflects a preoccupation of a lot of these issues, which was juvenile delinquency. This is from 1966, where Superboy becomes a juvenile delinquent. And these are, I swear, this dog is smart enough to know that she is not allowed to be in comic book videos, so she makes noise, because she wants to be. I swear. But these are hallowed things for me. I've read these more than any other comic. I love them more than any other comic. The only comics that I love more than these are from the early 1960s, and the only ones that I like more are the ones from the late 1940s and all through the 1950s. Superboy and adventure comics in the late 1940s and early 1950s. Those are the issues that are personal scripture to me. These come close. I love them. I've read them a million times, far more than anything much better. I'm perfectly willing to admit that superhero comics get much better than this. These are completely gimmicky. But you can't, the heart wants what the heart wants. And the era of Superboy right before these, from his introduction in the late 40s to the full flower of the book in the 1950s, that is my very first love, not only in comics, but in reading. And one of my first loves in reading. I was also, at the time that I was falling in love with those issues, I was also being introduced to books. And the two went hand in hand. I would enjoy myself with those comics, but I didn't consider comics reading. No one in a million years would have thought this would ever be a book. And so far as I know, they never have been. But maybe someday DC Comics will come out with a big anthology of Superboy. Wouldn't that be incredible? Oh my God, I'd be first in line to buy it. And in the meantime, there are quite a few digital copies of those early issues of Superboy that mean the world to me. And I put out the call for digital comics and digital books to a lot of you, and a lot of you have been very generous. I have been revisiting some of those issues, and the incredible luxury of opening a 1950 issue of Superboy on a screen and not needing to worry about getting ink on your fingers or destroying the paper. The paper on here is almost gone. And also the ability to zoom in on artwork is amazing. That is just amazing. So, and I wouldn't get that in a big anthology volume, but I'll take the anthology volume absolutely if it ever comes. So that's your comics for today. Your back issue tour for today involves not only a super team up, intercompany team up that I just waited forever to see. And one of the neat things about that, I forgot to show you. One of the neat things about that Avengers Justice League team up is that when the teams are looking back, when they're together, just sort of socializing together, and they look back on all the various team ups that they've had over the years, George Perez resurrects a panel from his original proposed team up. That's just awesome. But as much as I love that, nothing tops these Superboy issues. Nothing. I could, now that I have them out, I'm going to reread them all, every bit of them, before I put them back in the long box. So that's my first love. A superpowered teenage boy and his dog fighting crime in the American Midwest in the 1950s. that is about as pure for me as the comic book experience gets. So that's your Friday comics. We'll be back again on Wednesday. Who knows? I might get new issues on Wednesday. I might steal myself and go to the comic shop. In the meantime, I have to go and settle my dog, who's going crazy because I told her she can't be in this video. 3-year-olds. But anyway, I will be back. Thank you, BookTube.